As the lights dimmed on stage and I raised the gilded scissors to the ribbon, the screens behind me suddenly came to life, not with the Foundation's logo but with a cold, merciless email interface, where the cursor slowly opened an email with a subject line that cut deeper into the room than any pair of scissors could: "Your empire stands on sand." 100 cameras captured my frozen profile, the champagne in my glasses quieted like the sea before a storm, and I saw stacked spreadsheets of accounts, names of shell companies, electronic signatures, terse lines of transfers, stubbornly leading from children's oncology wards to two small islands where children's voices are never heard. My press secretary held her breath, the room fell into darkness, and I felt the soles of my shoes sticking to the stage as if it were made of hot bitumen rather than ash. Someone in the front row quietly asked if this was part of the show, and the unborn laughter died in my throat. I had not believed in coincidences before I learned to count the cost of silence with other people's biographies, but this montage was too precise to be coincidence. The red graphs that coincided with the dates of my public promises, the sloppy screen of my letter to the lawyer with the word sorry in the subject line, the soundtrack with the sterile clicking of keys, as if the whole world was typing a guilty verdict. I smiled the way one smiles in the mirror before a difficult meeting, and at the same time, in my ear, whispered lines from my bodyguard, who had long since lost the difference between advice and order. "Sir, let's go backstage, we have an exit on the left." I felt like I was standing in a shop window, and the shop window was a thermometer that never dropped below 40, because my face had learned not to sweat when everything around me was on fire. "This is editing," I said into the microphone that smelled of metal and the fingers of an assistant. "Someone knows how to have fun." In response, the hall fell silent, the kind of silence that makes you want to check your heart. I saw a woman in the fourth row stand up with a handkerchief in her hand. She had lost her daughter, and we were putting her name on the marble, and I wanted to reach out to her, but my right hand held a pair of scissors, like a symbol that connected me to this city, to this scene, to this crime, even if it wasn't mine. 2 lines flashed across the screen that I didn't remember, an internal memo with my signature authorizing temporary redirection of operating balances, and a short reply that I recognized by the subtle grammatical habit of using a dash instead of a comma. Only one man in my circle had this habit, a man I had entrusted not with the keys to the safes but with what counts as a key when the safes are empty. "Brother," I whispered so quietly that the microphone couldn't hear, "if this is your handwriting, then today you took me down from the cross and nailed me to a billboard." The ribbon beneath the scissors quivered from the air conditioning, like someone else's breath on my neck, and I realized that everything I had been building was actually a stage where I was playing the role of the man who always controls the lights. The audience demanded explanations, I demanded a voice from myself, and the screens, like a starry sky, showed me a constellation of my mistakes, made up of dots that I had once called the right decisions. When the light came back on, I was no longer holding the scissors, I was holding my own skin, peeled off in front of the city, and I felt the silence between 2 brothers, each believing that he was saving the other by driving the first nail, sink under my feet. The first news came out before I had time to get to the office. My name was flying in the headlines next to the words shock, betrayal, corruption scheme, and even those who had kissed my hand at charity evenings yesterday were now commenting with bitter disappointment. My photo, the same one where I smile against the background of a children's oncology clinic, was cropped so that only the palm of my hand with a watch worth 100,000 was left, as if my entire image was reduced to a metallic shine. The phone was ringing with calls from lawyers, journalists, partners, but I was waiting for only one number, my brother. He didn't answer. I was driving through a city that suddenly didn't seem mine. Every billboard with my face looked at me like a dead star, still shining but long since burned out. There were reporters standing outside the central office, and when I got out of the car, it felt like the camera was a scope, and every question was a bullet. "Did you embezzle the fund? Is it true that your brother was the accountant in the scheme? Did you know where the children's money was going?" I walked through the crowd without answering a word. They shouted, I remained silent. In this game, silence cost more than any excuses. Inside, a team was waiting for me, people who had written to me thank you, boss yesterday, and today sat there with blank stares, as if I were already a corpse who didn't know that I was dead. My lawyer spread out papers in front of me, long lists of transactions that really did look suspicious. And each one had one common signature, my brother, the sender. "That's him," the lawyer said, not looking me in the eye. "It was all done through his office. But that doesn't exist for the media. On paper, you are the head of the fund, so the responsibility is solely yours." I listened and didn't hear. I saw the years of trust one had built fall to the floor like glass from a shop window. And then there was that pitiless detail: my brother never invested in official structures, he was a shadow, someone who did everything cleanly. If he dumped me, it means he found meaning in it, or someone who paid him more than blood. That evening I finally got through. His voice was calm, even warm. "You understand," he said, "this is not against you. This is against who you have become." I was silent. "You always said that the truth is for the weak. You bought silence, played God, and then demanded that everyone pray to you gratefully for it." I was ashamed. "And I did what you never could, admit that we were both rotten. You betrayed me." "No, brother," he breathed out, "I simply opened the curtain. And the world saw who you really were." The line was cut. I sat in the dark, and on the monitor in front of me, more and more articles opened: searches, arrests, frozen accounts. I lost control. But worse, I lost face. In the morning, the police arrived at my penthouse. They didn't beat me, they didn't shout. They just politely showed me the warrant and asked me to come with them. My neighbors filmed me on their phones as they led me to the black car. The city that I had fed with money was now feeding on my shame. That evening, for the first time, I felt what it was like to be nameless. And only when the cell door closed, I realized that I still had a strange, almost childish hope left in me, that this was not the end, that someone else was waiting behind this darkness. But I didn't know who. The prison smelled of damp brick and lost voices. The days merged into gray streaks, as if someone had rewound life at minimum speed so that I had time to examine each of my own mistakes. They took away my suits, phones, and power, but they left me time. And time is the cruelest executioner. At first I tried to write statements, demand an audit, ask to meet with lawyers, but with each passing hour I realized that out there, outside, I had already been crossed out. The fund was closed, the buildings were seized, and my brother's name had become a symbol of an honest whistleblower. On one of the next sleepless nights, I heard a rustling from the next cell. The voice was hoarse, old, but calm. "Aren't you sleeping, Emperor?" he said. "I'm no longer the Emperor," I answered. "Only the shadow of a suit." Shadows also have a price. Sometimes even higher than their owners. We talked for several nights in a row. His name was Gavrilo, a former auditor of an international corporation that burned down due to a scandal similar to mine. Only he didn't make excuses. He said that he had seen everything, signed everything, but one day he realized, the biggest lie is not in the money, but in the belief that we control it. "You have a brother," he said on the third night. "That is your weakness. Blood is the thinnest wire through which power is transferred. He drags you to the bottom, but pretends to save you. He did it supposedly because of his conscience." Conscience? Gavrilo laughed softly. "Conscience is the currency that those who have nothing left trade." He took a small sheet from his book, a newspaper clipping. There was the name of the company through which transfers from my fund were made. Not state-owned, not controlled by me. A phantom structure registered in my brother's name, but with partners I knew well. Former board members, the same ones I had once forced out. And then the puzzle came together. "They used him," I whispered. "He thought he was exposing me, but in fact he opened the door to those who were simply waiting for me to weaken." "Classic," Gavrilo replied. "Empires don't fall because of their enemies. They are destroyed by those closest to them." I lay awake that night. I flipped through every memory, looking for the moment when everything went wrong. And then I saw, the first signature I had made my brother sign for me, when we were just starting out, was "in a hurry." Back then I had taught him to be part of the system, and now the system had taught him how to get rid of me. A week later I was released on bail. It was a trap, I knew that, but freedom, even poisoned, is always sweet. I stepped out into the cold wind, and the first thing I did was drive not home, but to an old warehouse in the port. There, among the empty containers, Gavrilo was already waiting for me. "You know where to dig," he said, handing me the flash drive. "But I warn you, what you find won't give you back your name. It will take away what's left of you as a human." I took the flash drive. And in that moment I realized that for the first time in my life, I no longer wanted to take back power, I wanted the truth. Even if it were my last ally. I sat in the dark office where I had once received ministers and businessmen, staring at the screen of a laptop connected to the same flash drive. On it were hundreds of documents, letters, diagrams, signatures. And most importantly, recordings of conversations made in secret. All this was proof that my brother's exposure was not an act of conscience, but a carefully planned operation. They had used him as a weapon, as a naive executor who thought he was cleansing the world. But cleansing does not exist when it is ordered through a bank account. I listened to the voices of those whom I considered friends, partners who had sworn allegiance to me when I stood at the top. Their cold intonations sounded like a sentence: when he falls, everything will return to our hands. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something deeper, akin to self-hatred. Because I had created these people. I taught them not to trust, I paid them to be cynical. And now their cruelty is a reflection of me. When I saw the last file, my heart sank. On the screen was a video of my brother. He was sitting in some office room, next to the lawyer for the group that now owned most of my assets. His voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed fatigue and fear. "I'm not doing this for the money," he said. "He has to stop, or the system will destroy him." The lawyer smiled. "The system, you say? We're just helping it speed up a little." I pressed pause and sat in silence for a long time. Everything became clear. He didn't want me dead, he just didn't know that the world I had built wouldn't allow it otherwise. That night I made a decision. Not to call the reporters, not to run, not to make excuses. I decided to return to the same room where I had been destroyed. But now with the truth. Not to justify, but to uproot the poison root that I myself had planted. At dawn I stood before the camera, no tie, no watch, no smile. On a live broadcast that gathered millions of viewers. "Yes," I said. "I was who you thought I was. Cold, tough, successful. I bought silence and sold the illusion of goodness. But what you saw is only part of the story. I was betrayed by those I created, and I make no excuses. I just want you to know evil is not born in the dark. It grows where everyone applauds." I put the documents in the public domain. Names, dates, invoices, evidence, everything. And then I realized that this is not a fight for the truth. This is a confession. When you fall, you have a chance to become a man, if you have the courage to look up. The next day my brother came to me alone. Without security, without the press. "You did something I didn't expect," he said. "You didn't clean up, you burned everything." "And that's all there is to it, cleaning up," I replied. We sat in silence. The sun was rising outside the window, and I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I had no control over anything, and that was the only real sense of freedom. But I knew they wouldn't forgive. The system I had exposed knew no mercy. It either devoured or destroyed. And that's why I left a letter that evening. In case this dawn was the last I would see. If anyone finds this note, let them understand, wealth is not in what you own. It's in what you are willing to lose in order to finally see yourself for who you really are. 2 days after my speech, I disappeared from the headlines. It always does, the world loves scandal but hates reflection. My offices were closed, my buildings sold, my accounts seized. All that was left was a name trampled underfoot by the name of truth. But I was no longer running from it. I went to the coast, where I had once bought land for a children's center. There, between the wind and the sound of the waves, for the first time in many years I felt a silence that was not oppressive. It simply was. I lived in a small fisherman's house, helping local children with their studies, repairing boats, cooking dinner over a fire. People didn't recognize me, and that was the greatest blessing I could have received. Every morning I would go out to the shore and watch the sun rise over the water, thinking that I had once built corporations with the same obsession with which I now simply watched the world move on without me and without my mistakes. Sometimes I would get the news. My brother, too, had been destroyed by the system he had come to believe in. Those behind him had used him and thrown him away when he was no longer needed. He would write me a letter, without anger, without excuses. "You were right," he wrote. "Truth without conscience is as empty as a lie without a reason." I didn't answer. Because what can you say to someone you love and have lost even before the betrayal happened? A few years passed. One day a young journalist came to see me. He was looking for a former tycoon to make a documentary about corruption. I recognized in his eyes the same ambition that had once lived in me. He spoke of the truth, of a mission, of exposing it. I listened silently, then I said to him, "If you really want to find the truth, don't look for it in murderers or politicians. Look for it in the mirror. Because that's where it lives." And then he dies. He didn't understand. Youth rarely hears what hurts. That night I opened my old laptop and found a video from that broadcast when I first admitted my guilt. I looked at myself, devastated, but alive. And I realized that for the first time I became real. I no longer wanted to rebuild the empire. I wanted to learn to be human, even if it meant living without a crown. The sea roared outside the window. I went outside, inhaled the salt, the cold, and the freedom. At night, among the waves, a star flashed, sharp, white, like a fragment of truth that pierced the sky. And it seemed to me that this was a sign. Not from God, not from fate, from the boy I once was, when I still believed that money could make the world a better place. I smiled. For the first time, without falsehood. The world forgot me. But perhaps this was salvation. Because when you are forgotten, you have a chance to remember yourself. And if someone ever finds these lines, let them remember. True wealth is not in owning the world, but in the fact that one day you dare to let it go.